and good afternoon. It is the second half of the term, the Easter term. My name is Lavinia and I'm from the M Word, and today I'm joined by Yasmin, our social media manager from the M Word. And today we're going to be talking about the stigma around self-harming, and we've got a fair amount of work to get through because there's quite a volume of information. And what we're going to do today is initially think about self-harming, but also then consider two different generations of information in and around experiences of self-harming. And I'm hoping that that will draw in a few more questions from our lovely viewers. So I'm going to kick off by thinking about, recently there was a programme on BBC 4 looking at self-harming, and the rate of self-harming in the young children in the UK has doubled over the last 6 years. And interestingly, the number of children aged 9 to 12 being admitted to hospital, having hurt themselves intentionally, rose from 221 in 2013 to 2014 to 508 in 2019-20. Now, obviously, when we're thinking about self-harming, that sounds quite alarming to a very young person thinking about doing such things. But when we're thinking about self-harming, a lot of people associate self-harming with purely sharps, as we call it in the medical arena. And what we mean by that is something that's either serrated or easily cuts, like glass, knives, razor blades, broken hard plastic, anything that's intentionally sharp. But there are other ways of self-harming, as Yasmin and I will explore a bit later in the programme. And the act of deliberately harming your body is what we're looking at today. And some people cut, some people burn, some people do a variety of ways. Again, Yasmin and I will look at that. And whilst it's not typically meant as a suicide attempt, it is very much a harmful way in trying to deal with emotional pain or intense anger and frustration. And so we're going to kind of look a bit more about that as the programme progresses. Now, the difficulty we've got with self-harming is that sometimes when we are self-harming, it can obviously be quite potentially dangerous. And because we're talking on such a sensitive subject today, what I would say is that Yasmin will be uploading this programme over the next couple of days, and there will be information where you can access, but we will also talk towards the end about what you can think about doing, going for further support, or of course you can talk on our Facebook community group. So without further ado, we're going to just think about from my perspective, being the older generation, around experiences around self-harming. So I was quite late to self-harming in the grand scheme of things. I wasn't a child, I wasn't even a teenager. I was in my mid to late 20s, and I had been actively suicidal when I was 15, 16, 17 and 18. And I had managed to get myself well away from that and never wanted to return, but had felt so vulnerable that I felt that I was struggling. And in a way to avert myself getting any lower, I resorted to self-harming with sharps. And although it is not a pleasant thing to do, and it's not certainly not for me a pleasant thing to admit, what I have found over the years, of course, is that when you're discussing things with clients, you find that actually they feel easier to talk about their difficulties, about the challenges, and about why they're self-harming, because they get you've done it as well. And the difficulty I had was that I was trying desperately to cope with a number of pressures, both in the home but also at my workplace. And it just got to the point where I couldn't feel confident enough at discussing my issues with both environments. And so hence the need to kind of think about, well, I feel so horrendous. How do I do it? Yasmin, what about your experiences? Because obviously we talked a lot yesterday about it, but what about your experiences?
So I self-harmed at 15 because of GCSE exam stress, and it was very in social media targeted towards me of this is how other people who have the same feelings I do, how they're dealing with it. So I thought I'll try it and maybe I'm just missing something and this will fix me or make me feel a bit better and I'll be able to function better with it. And I only did it once, fortunately, and it just didn't resonate with me. I didn't feel any better. I didn't feel any worse. So I kind of left it. But yeah, no.
Did you feel under pressure from other people around you, or was it purely media?
It was purely media, to be honest, because I wasn't super confident and social in school. So I would go online and it was very easy to find these communities that had quite a negative overtone to them. But when you first find them, they didn't seem bad for you to kind of, you felt a community of, oh, I'm not the only person who feels this bad, or I'm not the only one going through things that are making me feel isolated. Over time, it slowly but surely does kind of mess with how your outlook is on things.
Yeah.
And it was quite scary now that I'm older and can look back on how easily I found it. Because I know I wasn't looking for it. It kind of just fell into my lap.
Yeah. And I suppose the difference between you and me is that I didn't have the internet at that point to kind of be aware that others were doing it. And also, I didn't have a wide social network of friends. And I don't believe I knew anybody in my very small circle of friends who were self-harming. So for me, I kind of viewed it as this is a problem that I have to resolve. And when you're thinking about how to do it, how do you do it? How do you go about it? You just happen to find something that's sharp. And I remember thinking the most obvious thing, of course, is in the kitchen. There are knives. Years later, I began to learn that actually lots of young people can be highly experimental. Anything, absolutely anything can be used if you choose to use it, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say the top item, other than a pair of scissors or razor blades, was the inside of a pencil sharpener, and you could take that out. And obviously, it was in your pencil case. You had it at school. It was very easy to get out, especially with the plastic sharpeners. You could just stamp on it and it would come out.
Yeah.
So I think people thought it wasn't that easy to get hold of them, but in reality, they're everyday objects. Like you could get them anywhere. You could buy them, and nobody's going to think, "Oh, you're buying that to hurt yourself or to do some damage to something." It's like, "Oh, I'm just buying something to sharpen a pencil."
Yeah, absolutely. So, I just wanted to just have a quick look back at the Radio 4 program, because obviously they mentioned what they thought were thinking about why people do it. And we've got our own kind of considerations, and we will talk about that in a minute. But it was thinking about, it's not meant as a suicide attempt. It's a harmful way to cope with, in their words, emotional pain, intense anger and frustration. What do you think about that? I mean, would you agree, or?
I mean, I personally would agree, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I certainly found that as a way of coping. I suppose the emotional pain doesn't feel like it's expanded hugely, because I think there's a variety of reasons why it comes under the pot or label as emotional pain, doesn't it? For me, I felt I had nowhere to go. There was nobody I could talk to about, am I achieving? Am I good enough? Am I doing that? But there are other people who feel like they are being a burden and cannot cope with that, and they don't want to commit suicide, but equally they can't cope with that level of pain. And it's an interesting one, because the emotional pain covers a lot of areas, doesn't it? A lot of reasons why you might consider it. So what about your experiences?
So when I tried self-harm for the first time, it was probably a week or two after I had a proper big breakdown, where I was crying, saying, I need to die. I can't sit these exams. I need to die. No, I'm a burden on everybody else. I'm a waste of space. I don't have anything that I'm good at. I'm not. I kind of felt like I'm just an object in a room. I'm not. Nobody wants me or needs me. I'm not somebody's kind of purpose to wake up in the morning. So I was like, well, there's not much for me to do. And if anything, me sticking around longer is just going to prolong, the inevitable. I'm never going to find this niche that I'm supposed to be here for. So when I tried self-harm, I was like, well, maybe this is a way to, kind of feel like I am doing that without having to actually die. Because I think I still now, I think I find the thought of death very scary, and I can have dark days, and I still can't bring myself to put myself through the intense amount of pain I feel like death would be. So I think that's one of the things that stops me.
Yeah. I just wondered as well, because we're both autistic, right? And I know that we talk a lot about autistic people not being able to feel in a way that neurotypicals feel. And that you've tried it once. I've done it several times until I was able to somehow get out of it again. But I know from other experiences that I've had with clients advising me is, if you don't know what it feels like, or somebody's telling you, this is what it looks like, or this is what it feels like, and you can't relate to that, how do you feel anything? And sometimes the easiest way is to do something physically in order to be able to relate, oh, that hurts. So, for example, I had a young client who deliberately fell so that they could get that level of pain impact to feel something. But, there are other ways, obviously, in order to feel that. What do you reckon about that?
I think as an autistic person, sometimes I do feel like I'm in a limbo situation of I don't know how this feels, I don't know how that feels, but people are telling me that's what I should be looking for, and I'm just not finding it. So I haven't been able to experience it for myself. I'm kind of having to go off the textbook of humanity, so to speak, of people going, this is the experience, this is what it feels like. And when I'm searching for it and it's not quite clicking, I suddenly think, oh, well, clearly that's not what it is. And I'm continuing to search. And I think with other, like, purposely falling and stuff, it's something that you can easily blame on, oh, I'm just being clumsy. It's not as obvious and in your face as other forms of self-harm is. So you can kind of trick yourself into thinking, well, I'm not doing it on purpose. I'm not self-harming myself. This isn't something because I'm feeling slightly upset or I'm struggling with something. You can blame it as, oh, well, maybe I'm just a little bit clumsy today.
And then it's not so obvious to other people, I suppose, as well, isn't it? Yeah. And also the understanding around some people are very quick to respond and say, oh, of course they're attention seeking, or they did it deliberately, and you do see, and certainly from my experience as a clinician, you do see there are some people who have, rows of self-harming scars, but equally there are lots of people who will deliberately self-harm in areas that's completely inaccessible for other people to view. And self-harming is also that association with sharps, when in actual fact, we know that that's not right. There, it's a wide arena, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So maybe we should move on then to thinking about the different types of self-harming. Do you want to start off with any ideas?
Well, one that was on the list of things to do instead of self-harming, which is ice and salt in your hands, which burns the layer of your palms, which I think is just as bad.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And you also said yesterday we were talking about elastic bands, which is one of those. Go on, tell me.
Yeah, I mean, to have a counsellor sit down and go, oh, it's okay to do this rather than that, you're still cutting your skin if you do it enough times, and it's just a slightly longer route to cutting your wrists, really. It's not a deterrent. If anything, it's a lot easier to do, because I know a lot of girls or people with longer hair have hair ties on their wrists a lot, and you can do it. And again, it's something that's more secretive, and people could look at you and go, oh yeah, they're just anxious, or oh yeah, they're just fidgeting. And it's like, no, they're trying to get some sort of feeling from doing something, and they're doing it in plain view sometimes, you know, and it's just overlooked because it's not a sharp, or it's not, you know, they're not screaming and crying going, oh, I'm really upset. You know, it doesn't show the symptoms that are potentially kind of force fed to us via larger companies.
So do you think then, you know, let's take the example of the hairband, you know, if you're pinging yourself quite hard, you know, one thought I had was perhaps somebody is masking and they're actually on the autistic spectrum and they're sensory seeking. But equally, you know, like you say, with is that really going to do the trick? If you are self-harming with a hairband and it's not giving you that emotional relief, are you then more likely to kind of think, well, that didn't work, that's just totally a waste of time, I might as well just have gone straight to the razor straight away? I mean,
I personally fiddle with hairbands because of autism. I have them constantly up my arm. I've luckily reminded myself to take them off for this, because otherwise I'll just have them everywhere. And it hurts a lot, but if you're doing it in the same place, it's very easy. It'll look like it's doing nothing, and then suddenly you've kind of got a rather large cut. You know, so I think if you don't have the patience, so to speak, if you're looking for that as a self-harm attempt, you're probably going to turn to other things. Whereas if you are sensory seeking and you realize you've hurt yourself, you're probably, you know, that wasn't your intention, but because you've kept doing it, that's kind of what's happened. Whereas if you're wanting self-harm, you kind of want a relief then and there. You don't want to, okay, it's going to take me half an hour of doing it repetitively to kind of get like a slight paper cut. You know, it is a time-consuming action, and I personally don't like the fact that you've got, you know, counsellors saying, oh, with each ping, think of a negative thought and it will get rid of it. And it's like, well, that just seems that you're encouraging it, and I don't like that.
Yeah, and do you think it works, or you know,
absolutely not.
If yeah, okay.
Just absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I got given that information when I was 11. So I had a counsellor come and sit me down and say, this is what you need to do instead. And even at 11, I was going, that doesn't seem like that's very good, useful information. And I had this counsellor insisting, no, it's fine, you should do this instead. And it's like, politely, I'm not going to take that information. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So different signs and symptoms of self-injury, according to this program, was about scars, often in patterns, fresh cuts, scratches, bruises, bite marks, or other wounds, excessive rubbing of an area to create a burn, keeping sharp objects on harm, wearing long sleeves or long trousers, even in hot weather, frequent reports of accidental injury, difficulties in interpersonal relationships, behavior and emotional instability or impulsivity and unpredictability, and statements of hopelessness and worthlessness. And already some of those are kind of triggering for me, and thinking about, you know, actually there's a lot of autistic people on the spectrum who would fit into any of those with regards to signs and symptoms. But then when they were thinking about the forms of self-injury, obviously the cutting, scratching, burning, carving words or symbols on the skin, self-hitting, punching or head banging, piercing the skin with sharp objects, and inserting objects under the skin. Is there any others that you think should be included in self-injury? Because self-harming, because this is more about self-injury, isn't it, with the use of sharps, but also burning, piercing. These are all about sharps, aren't they? But you and I were talking yesterday quite extensively about other things.
So one of the recommendations when you're feeling low and upset is to have a hot bath, and I find that's just encouraging people to go and sit in very, very hot water.
Just cold.
Yeah, I have quite a high heat tolerance, so what might be an all right bath for me, that is going to turn somebody absolutely lobster red, and that can be painful, especially if they feel like this was the advice given to me. When you've got kind of an authority position in your life telling you this is how you should deal with it, this is how you should combat how you're feeling, but you're actually kind of endorsing another form of it's painful to sit in boiling water. I don't know anybody who would willingly going, you know what, I'm going to just turn the hot tap on full throttle and I'm going to sit in that water for like an hour. It is a punishment, and it's not supposed to be a punishment. It's supposed to be something to help you maybe stop trying to hurt yourself. But it does often feel like a punishment, like a medieval torture instrument.
I was thinking as well as there are things that look rather innocent looking, and yet if you were to monitor over a 24-hour period, you would realize that isn't actually the norm. And we were talking yesterday about how somebody can quite happily go to a pub and nobody would think anything of it. But if you're in a pub all day drinking, isn't that a form of self-harming? Or likewise, if you drink coffee all day, regular cups of coffee throughout the day, more than 3, more than 7, I remember being really stressed as a student working in a children's nursery, and I was so distressed that I just kept drinking caffeine. And then one day I actually monitored how many cups of coffee I'd drunk, and it had been 13, and it was only 2:00 in the afternoon, and I wondered why. I was like, but isn't that a form of, surely that's a form of self-harming? It's not normal to put 13 cups of coffee down. But also we talked about other ways, like, for example, being a bit of a workaholic, or undereating, overeating. You could be eating food and then obviously trying to get rid of it after you've eaten it, taking drugs. There are so many things that look quite innocent, but actually if you were to monitor it over a 24-hour period, you would for sure begin to see that there's a bit of a pattern developing. And I just wondered if you had any other ideas that you knew of that could be like, well, that looks fairly innocent, but okay, maybe not.
I think you've covered the main ones.
Yeah.
You could say something simple like sewing or something, because you're purposely trying to prick yourself in the finger with a needle, but that'll look like you're doing something creative. You're making something, so you can't possibly be hurting yourself while you're trying to do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it wasn't a self-harm thing, but when I was at school, I remember during a DT project where we were using needles, kids would think it was funny to insert them all the way through their finger. And it was like, so other people were starting to go, oh, well, I'll do that as well. And then you're going to have somebody who's going to go, oh, actually, that feels kind of nice because I'm not feeling very, but you wouldn't have noticed. It was just something like, a small challenge in between children. But it's quite dangerous, really, when you think about it.
Very dangerous. And why would you start doing that in the first place? And I suppose, you know, the difficulty we have as well is that people really don't understand why people self-harm, particularly if they're very averse to pain. And again, that feeds back to people who are autistic, not necessarily feel pain or have incredibly high thresholds around pain and discomfort. And that's quite challenging as well. Okay. One of the things that I kind of just wanted to think about was I remember being newly qualified and finding that clinicians, particularly general nurses, were highly disgusted with people self-harming, like highly, really. And that horrible phrase would come about they're just attention seeking. What's your take on that now, given, you know, you've obviously been going to school in the last 10 years, unlike myself, but, you know, has it changed? Is it more acceptable now?
I think schools are starting to kind of pay more attention to it, but sometimes they do maybe overly give certain people attention, and then there's people who are probably milling about that they could possibly use just some of that attention. But I think the thing is as well with self-harm, it's a very negative light. You know, I was in school in 2017, and I remember anytime we learned about it in lessons, it was very one narrative of it's negative, it's selfish, it's bad. And it's like, well, then how do I get help for it? How do I feel confident enough to go to somebody and say, look, I'm struggling through this, without feeling like they're going to judge me, or they're going to think I'm this really horrible person, or like there's something wrong with me because I've fallen into this kind of pit of thinking that this is how I need to deal with it, when it's not. It's not effective enough. You kind of need to stop, not find other ways to continue doing it. And I think it can be very frightening to try and get help, especially when the people you're supposed to go to potentially have kind of submerged their personal opinions into this information. But if we don't have this information, it would just go unnoticed and we wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah. And yesterday you were talking about being in class where a teacher was very determined to talk about it, but also in a blame way.
Yeah. So my teacher, unfortunately, it was very, this is the textbook, reading aloud, bullet points. And the main thing I took away from that is self-harm and suicide is selfish because you are putting your issues onto everybody else once you've gone, you know. So if you're already kind of feeling I'm a burden to people, you know, being told, oh, by the way, if you hurt yourself or you purposely try and, you know, remove yourself, you're even more of a burden. And it's like, well, then where do I go? You know, if both outcomes are negative, do I just not say anything? It's very kind of misinformation. But like I said, it's only one narrative. It wasn't self-harm is not the best way to deal with it. Here's other ways, or here's people that can help, or let's have a slightly positive discussion about it, or let's have a bit of a debate about whether it is selfish or not. You know, it was all very, it is selfish, it is wrong, you know. And so you're sitting there kind of going, oh, all this information's being thrown at me, but it's only one opinion, one voice of it's wrong. How dare you do this? Because you're putting your issues onto everybody else. How do you think your mum would feel? How do you think your friends would, you know? And it's all, well, great. I'm already worrying about them already, which has led me to kind of this dark patch. And now I'm worrying about it even more because, it's even more negative. So then you kind of think, well, I just won't say anything. And then, you know, you'll have somebody go, why don't people come forward about it? Why is it so negative? And it's like, have you listened to what you've said in the past of it's wrong, it's bad? It's kind of like a witch hunt almost, you know?
Yeah. But you also talked about how it felt so uncomfortable because it had got to a point where you just felt you couldn't listen to it anymore. You had to leave. But you also noticed somebody else was struggling. What happened with that?
So we were maybe 15 minutes into lesson, and I said, look, I have to go outside. I can't sit through this because it's a bit too close to home for me, and I don't feel comfortable being told all this negative stuff. And my teacher was quite happy to go, oh yeah, you can go outside for a couple of minutes, you know, I'll bring you back in when we've changed subject. And I look across the classroom as I'm trying to go out, and I see another girl looking like she's either about to cry or pass out. I couldn't quite tell which one. And you can kind of tell she was thinking, oh, well, Yasmin's leaving. Maybe I could get the confidence to say, can I also go and stand outside? And from what I remember, I'm pretty sure one of her friends said, blah, 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 is also feeling unwell. Can she go outside as well? And my teacher straight away went, no, don't be ridiculous. You have to learn this. It's part of the curriculum. It's going to be on your exams. And it's like, so why do I get to leave? And this other person's probably sat there going, well, that's not fair. Why does she get to leave? Why does she get to go outside? You know, and I think it was because, unfortunately, the school were on high alert for me when I don't think they should have been. Because, you know, apparently autistic people who are creative can't write things nowadays without, you know, everyone jumping on going, oh my God, she might try and kill herself in the toilets. Oh my God. And it's like, no, I'm fine. And then you've got somebody else who's like, I can see they're struggling. As another student, I can see they're struggling. And you are supposed to be like, you know, responsible adults, and you're either seeing this and not doing anything about it, or you're completely oblivious, you know? And I think it's because, unfortunately, the medical field has kind of, you know, done, these are the signs of depression, da-da-da-da-da. And if they don't fit, they're not depressed, you know, they're fine. They're just having a slightly off day. Or the one I hear a lot is it's just teenage angst, or they're just a bit angry, they're just a bit upset, it's just hormones. And it's like, well, what if something had happened? Then the school's going to go, well, we didn't notice. We had no signs because we didn't fit this mold of what a depressed person should look like, or what a self-harmer should look like. And it's a stereotype, really, isn't it?
It is. And I was struck by parents telling me a few months ago that they had gone to meet with the school on behalf of their child, and had been advised that, you know, there was at least 10% of the school who were self-harming, and they all were not having to have input or support to the extent that their child was. And thankfully the parents are quite assertive, going, well, that's not our problem, that's your problem, but you know, we would hope you would support those others. And I do think you're right. There is very much this expectation. We've taken advisories, we know exactly what to do, but fail to miss the more obvious signs. Like, how is it you noticed and the other girl spoke up for their friend? How is it 3 of you are aware, 2 of you are not comfortable, and yet the teacher was completely dismissive? But because you had been on the radar of other teachers because of a poem, a very dark poem, it's associated that actually you are the one that can be allowed to stay out. How long were you outside of the classroom then before they changed the subject?
20 minutes, half an hour.
So
I stood out on my phone for most of it, because I was like, you know, and I do feel
so that poor girl was made to listen for another 20 minutes.
Yeah, and I could hear through the door, and I could hear that it was all still very one narrative, selfish, bad, don't do it. And my RE lesson was always the last lesson of the day. So as soon as the lesson ended, this girl just booked it down the corridor, head down, did not talk to anybody. And it was like, she's going to go home probably thinking, I don't know if she was unfortunately self-harming, or if maybe she was just kind of in the corner before you turn to the street of, oh, that's what I need to do. But, you know, my teacher wasn't an oblivious man. And he wasn't, but because I'd been put on the radar, you know, I'd been pulled out of a lesson and told to go and see the guidance counsellor because I'd been cutting a piece of paper in form, and oh my God, I was high risk. So they got told I held scissors to my wrist, and I got told, we're going to call your mum. She needs to know. And I went, you do realise my mum is a mental health nurse, right? And they went, yes. And I was like, and you really think I don't have discussions with how I feel about my mum? Because my mum's very open about it. You know, my mum doesn't want me going through things that she's having to deal with her clients, or that she went through. No, you're very high risk. We need to inform your mum. And I'm crying there going, please don't bother my mum. She's going to be really like, not annoyed at me, but she's going to be very confused as to why this school, who only see me for 6 hours a day, are going, oh no, she's high risk. She's going to try and, kill herself, or she's really suicidal. Like, I didn't show self-harm, I don't think,
So do you think they have an assumption, an association then, that if you're self-harming, it must be because you're suicidal?
Oh, for sure. Because I remember being told, we for a couple of lunchtimes, we need to keep an eye on you so you don't sneak off. And all I could think is, if I was at that high level of suicide, do you really think I'd want to go and off myself in the school bathrooms where anybody could find me? That's not going to be a nice place to end your life, unfortunately. But they were so kind of blindsided, and the blinkers were on, that you've written this slightly dark poem, which was inspired by BBC documentaries, and I wasn't asked, oh, what made you to write this? I was straight away, without my consent, taken to the guidance counsellor saying, your English teacher's come forward and said you've written something rather disturbing. And it was like, I didn't think it was disturbing, but okay, and the thing is, I was going online social media at that time, where the kind of text or voice that I had in my poem was very common to find about there. So where I was getting inspiration from was kind of all in the same kind of voice that I was using. So I'm not 100% sure if that poem was 100% organically my voice, or maybe it was like a bit of inspiration from here and there. But clearly it was very concerning, because I even made you read it and you were like, oh yeah, I like it, it's good. And you've got this English teacher going, oh my god, I've got to go and tell somebody, she's gonna hurt herself, she's gone off the rails, oh my god. And I'm just sat there going, oh, okay, I thought I was just having a nice Thursday evening, but okay, apparently not.
Yeah. So okay, we've got schools then where it can be very much textbook, this is how it is. It's selfish. It's not anything about, a young person trying to find a way of coping. It's not seen as a coping mechanism. It's seen as, this is an attempt. This is something that's really serious and is well on the pathway for suicidal thoughts and plans. And from my experience with working with schools, there is a lot of work that still needs to be done, because like you think, they are really quite blinkered in how they're doing it. But if they're only looking at it from a textbook version, it is really difficult to kind of get a positive narrative in understanding why people do self-harm. And the other thing that I get very concerned around is that young people are under a huge amount of distress at school, but school do not seem willing to consider that they are contributing to potentially the self-harming behavior. If a young person is told, you must attend school, you must sit your exams, you must complete the homework, and also parents are then threatened with, you must send your child to school or you will be fined. And all of this adds pressure, does it not? Because it feels like there is no way out. If you think about young people going into hospital, either voluntarily, asking to go into hospital, or they are being taken to hospital, with parents or against their will, because they've been doing extensive self-harming. Even then, you do question, are they being fully understood as to why they are self-harming? So I'll give you an example. I was in Bristol Infirmary, and I'd been asked to go and see a young person who was about 14 on the wards. They'd been kept overnight, and this young person had been extensively self-harming for about 3.5 years. There was a lot of issues going on in the family background that people assumed was part of the reason. However, nobody at any point had gone and asked the young person. So when I was taking down the history with the young person and the parent, after a while, the parent said, "Would you mind if I go and get a drink?" And at that point, I said, "Yes. Are you happy for me to carry on?" "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'll be back in a minute." And the young person said, there and then, "Nobody bloody well listens to me. I'm so utterly fucked off with you all. You don't ever listen." And I said, "Fine. Tell me in your words exactly what is the issue, and I'm going to write it down, and I'm going to action whatever you say we need to think about actioning." And what had happened was that they had had a recent stint within a psychiatric unit, which was supposed to be supportive of what was going on at home. And yet, because they would not believe the young person, the wrong information had been fed back. So, of course, the self-harming had continued and continued and continued. So there clearly is a breakdown in communication, because whatever we say doesn't necessarily guarantee that it will be listened to. And you have this understanding that there are some professionals, even within psychiatry, who assert that they must know best, and therefore whatever comes out of a young person's mouth is not correct.
Yeah.
So now I know you've had experience of that, not obviously in hospital, but you have had experience of that.
Unfortunately, I got to the point where I was laying awake at night thinking I could walk to the next town over because I know there's a bridge there, and I could jump right now and nobody would stop me. And I think, again, a lot like my fear of death being painful, my fear of the dark kept me in the house, so I didn't end up going because I was like, I'm going to have to walk at least an hour in the dark. I'm not doing that. So I kind of stayed at home, and I was like, okay, I need to go and get help, because this is getting serious now. Because if it was daylight, I probably would have gone, and who knows what happened. And I did go to get help, and I was of age to go by myself. And as a family, we had a discussion, and you said, I don't personally feel comfortable going. This is something you kind of need to do by yourself. And I was 16, so I was like, I'm quite happy to go by myself. And actually, I'd be more comfortable if I went alone. Within 2 minutes of me walking into the room, "Where is your parent? I want to have a word with them." And it's like, but I read the letter. And as an autistic person who also has anxiety, I will read over letters for invitations for things or appointments, going, okay, I want to make sure that nobody goes, "You've forgotten this thing," or "This isn't right." I'm like, I've got to know exactly the situation. So I was like, no, the letter said I could come by myself because I'm over the age of 14. Well, that's not right. I want to talk to your parent. I want to talk to your guardian. And it was like, well, she doesn't want to be here. Well, how dare she decide she doesn't want to be here? I want to have a word with her. And I was like, oh, okay. And then further down the discussion, she was like, well, you've got depression, but I don't want to give you the title because I know you teenagers are just going to throw it around as a title. And it was like, so I've got this issue. You can recognize I've got this issue, but you're going to send me on my merry way because you think I'm going to go brandishing it about, going, oh, did you know I've got depression? I wouldn't have. I know I wouldn't have. And it kind of felt like, so I've had all this confidence to be able to come to you and go, look, I really need help, only for you to go, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that because you're going to use it for something. And it's like, oh, okay. So I left thinking, well, that was a waste of my time. She didn't really listen to me. And again, the issue I had with you not being there, she went, would you be happy with me contacting your guardian? I said, no, thank you. My guardian and I have discussed, and she didn't want to come, and I don't want to share this information. It's something I need to do by myself. Only to find she went behind my back and called you anyway. And it's like, so this service, I now feel like, even if I wanted to go back, which I don't feel comfortable talking about the intimate parts of what's going inside my head, because I just feel like they're going to go and tell somebody else. And I think that idea, or those kind of stories, because you hear about them online all the time.
Yeah.
Maybe another group of young children who are, teenagers who are going, well, maybe I also need help. And then hear these horror stories of going, they violated my trust in them. So then it's like, well, I don't want to go and talk to them because they're going to go and tell everybody. And you don't feel confident enough for everyone to know. You just kind of want to know, is there something wrong with me? Can I get help for it? And instead it's, there's something wrong with you because you're attention seeking, and I'm going to go and tell everybody. And it's like, well, that's not comforting. You know, I don't know anymore.
So that kind of reiterates again, because my worry is that young people do feel very suspicious of professionals. And when you think about the work that the M Word is trying to do, we are trying to show young people that we can be trusted, and that if you do tell us information, providing it's not a major risk, you know, we will try and contain the information to keep it confidential. The difficulty we have is when it becomes a safeguarding issue, then of course it becomes a problem, in that you kind of need to go back to the parents, particularly if they are 16 below, but also if they are above 16, but it is clear that they don't have the capacity to be independently making a good decision, a healthy decision. And that's always a very grey area. And the other thing I wanted to kind of just very briefly consider is that there is a lot of people who believe that removing all types of sharps would save the day. And we talk about positive self-harming in the medical arena, and it's a very difficult game to consider. It's not a game, it's the balance of what would be safe or what would be unsafe. And so a lot of clinicians are not happy to take responsibility with the parents to talk about what would be a positive way of self-harming. And so they will just simply say, get rid of everything, lock everything away. But for you, I know, as a young person, if we talk about things, you're going to have less sort of wish to go and find something. Whereas if you lock it away, then you're going to think, well, now where do I go? And all you're going to think about is, well, where do I get it from? And then you're going to look, you're going to find it, you're going to hide it. So again, I've had many young people who've hidden razor blades in the back of their phone, underneath the sole of their shoes, you know, anywhere, so that they know they've got a backup plan. And I remember one client saying to me, you know, I have to have that, because whilst I've got that choice, I'm not going to do it. But if you remove it, then I'm going to go and find it, and I'm going to be so impulsive, I'm probably going to be a higher risk. So that positive self-harming sort of plan is not sitting comfortably with a lot of professionals and obviously a lot of parents. But what do you think about that?
I mean, I only self-harmed once, and I know I kept my razor blades for at least a year, even though I was like, oh, I don't like it. I still kept it. And I think one time you found what I'd hidden them in, but I don't think you knew they were in there, and you thought it was just rubbish. And I had a kind of meltdown about it, going, no, you can't get rid of it. Even though I was like, well, I don't need it, you know. But I kind of think it's a lot like, you know the saying that overprotective parents create sneaky kids. If you take away all of the options, it's not going to stop it. They will just get more creative with how they're going to do it or what they're going to find to do it. You can't, unfortunately, bubble wrap your kid for the rest of their life. You can, you know, it does have to kind of be something that you need to talk about so that people can find ways of dealing with it.
Yeah.
There kind of needs to be a transparency, because when there is secrets, they're just going to, you know, sit there, and they might collect dust for a while, but then they'll come out, and you know, you'll think, well, how did I not know this? And it's like, well, you know, you didn't either ask the right questions or you didn't react quite right, and that's created this kind of double life almost for your young person. Because I don't want to say that teenagers are, because, you know, I might not be one anymore, but at heart still am. You know, I can look back now going, I thought I knew everything. I thought nobody was going to understand, and that I knew exactly how I needed to deal with it. And now that I look back at it now, I'm kind of like, it's a bit disappointing that I felt that way. You know, why did I feel like that nobody was going to understand? I don't know if it was a combination of just, nobody's going to understand because I must be the only person going through this specific thing, or if it was the fact that I am an autistic person and I was thinking, I can't put people in my head to explain what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And if I can't quite get the words out correctly, they're just going to go, oh, yeah, okay. And they're still not going to understand what the key problem is. But I really think transparency, and I'm not saying you have to know every intimate detail. You don't have to know everything. You just kind of have to have this trust process going on that they can come to you to say anything. And if you have any concerns, you could go to them, and it's not going to be, why are you judging me? Or I can't tell you this because you're going to go crazy. You're going to think I've gone insane or something, it kind of just needs this level of trust, really.
Okay, I've got a challenge for you, Yasmin. As parents, what are some of the signs if what we should be looking out for? And that is a good one. Of course, you're now going to dob all the young people in, aren't you? But
I'll try not to.
It is a good one.
Well, I mean, you're also a parent, and I mean, every parent is going to know their child better than I could say this is the general of what you need to be looking for. I am very aware. I did actions that, again, could be confused as teenage angst. Like I would sit outside with a notebook and I would repeatedly listen to the fray How to Save a Life, because, in an emo turmoil going on at that age. But that wasn't who I was. That wasn't my personality. But somehow that was what I was putting out into the world. And I think you started kind of going, what is this behavior? Who is this person? I don't know who this is, but it was simple things. And again, some behavior that I picked up was because I wanted to fit in. And it was another layer of safety of I can use it to hide what is going on inside. And now that I'm older, I'm kind of just like, oh, if I could shake 16-year-old me going, you need to tell somebody, you need to talk about it more. Don't be nervous about what other people are going to think. I've got people who I went to school with who are still friends with me on Facebook. And when I was at school, I would second guess everything that I posted, thinking somebody at school is going to see it and they're going to think all these things about me. And now I'm kind of like, you know what? Whatever. I need to say it because I don't want to hide this. It's not something to be ashamed of. I'm sure quite a few of my classmates have kind of gone through the same issues, but because our parents, our teachers kind of didn't talk about it, we didn't talk about it to each other because, it's going to be used as ammunition to pick on you. So, and I think we kind of need to get rid of that. It's okay to talk about it. Maybe not everyone's going to get it. That's fine. But if you don't share the information that is multiple different points of view of this issue, we're never going to get anywhere.
Yeah. So there's something about communication, isn't there? Because, it is key, but it's also monitoring, like you said, parents do know their children really well. There are other sort of ideas, it's learning to express your emotions in positive ways. And I think this is quite challenging for autistic people. But for example, you talked a lot about this yesterday. We were talking about the fact that, it's not about going and running a hot bath. It's about, your well-being, doing things that you like doing, that you are good at doing, rather than trying to think of ways that actually could induce further types of self-harming. And one of them is practicing, relaxation techniques, but in the form that's, that's not. Not everybody's into mindfulness, but some people are into doing Lego, and some people are into doing Minecraft, and other people are into reading or listening to music or dancing to music, aren't they? So it's thinking about that.
There's absolutely no right way to do it. We're not saying, okay, you need to go out and do yoga, you need to go and do meditation. That is the way you solve it. For me personally, I know when I'm kind of in that little dip, I lose interest in quite a lot of my favorite things. So I try and do a little bit of my favorite thing. So like if I really, really like a TV show, or I like a movie, or recently F1, if I really like that, if I can't find myself sitting through an entire hour of it, just try and sit through 20 minutes, because, you know, even if it's background noise and you zone out, it's normal for you. And the way to get back on track is to not do something that's dramatic and it's like, that doesn't feel right. You kind of need to continue how you would every day, but just do it a little bit, so that if you zone out, if you decide, you know what, this is too much too soon, it's okay, but it's not out of your routine. It doesn't feel like it's not working because it's so different. It's more just kind of working your way back into what your routine would be.
Yeah. And would you say, talking about it and sharing experiences with your parent, did you find that helpful or useful? Or, okay, so it's not just me, if somebody has been there before me? Because I think a lot of parents who may not have self-harmed but have certainly wanted to feel other pain than the emotional pain would get it, wouldn't they? They could share that.
Yeah. I think the thing is with parents is sometimes it's very easy to forget your parent was also a person before you came along. They have not always been, you know, your 40-year-old stay-at-home mum or whatever. You know, they haven't always been that person. You haven't always been that person. I mean, I'm still surprised you had a motorbike. You played drums. I don't see that as you. I see you as my mum. But because you kind of raised me talking about it, I was very aware that compared to my peers my age, sometimes I was maybe too open about it and it was kind of frowned upon, but that's because they didn't have the luxury of being able to talk about it. So it was kind of still a taboo subject. And, you know, I am like, it might have annoyed me at the time, but I am very grateful that we were able to have those talks, because now I know if I had my children, I would be quite confident to talk about it, so they didn't feel in the dark, you know. And I think some children, again, forget that their parents were people. You know, you've had an entire life experience before I was born, before I went to school, you know. So sometimes I do, you might say things to me and I kind of roll my eyes and go, yeah, okay, whatever, you know, but then somebody else will say it and I'll go, oh yeah, that information makes sense, you know. You just have to be open to going, okay, my mum's not going on a rant. She's not lecturing me going, when I was your age, you know, it's not that kind of angle with it. It's a human experience that we all kind of share. It's not, you're not trying to tell me off. You're not trying to dismiss my feelings. You're just trying to give another narrative or another example of how you were feeling, how you went through it. And it might not be mirror exactly how I was feeling at the time, but it helps knowing, okay, somebody close to me has gone through it. It's not somebody on social media. It's not somebody in a TV show. It's somebody I know. It's somebody who I see every day, you know. Yeah.
I suppose by somebody who's real to you, it makes it real that, one, it's shared, and two, that, you know, you're not the only one. Whereas if it's somebody you don't know on social media, you could quite easily be forgiven for saying, well, that was them, isn't it? Whereas if it's open communication, it's kind of acknowledging, okay, so that's a bit of a struggle, and, you know, I have experienced that, you know, and we can share in that discussion. I'm just going to quickly have a look at these comments just in case, because we're just on the verge. Okay, so one parent has said, I don't like to go into his room because this is private space, but should I be looking for things that might appear different or seem out of the norm? And also, it's very hard to get our son to open up at times. He tends to bottle everything up and internalize it until he can't any longer. And then that massive wave of emotion comes out in scary ways. And I don't always know how to support. That is really tricky. And it's maybe something that we could explore a bit more next week, because we're talking, I think, next week about teenage awareness Day. Yeah. But for now, what I would say is just gently acknowledging that, you know, you can see they're having a bit of a tough time and that you are open to listening. And I think that's quite key, wouldn't you say, Yasmin? A parent saying, you know, I'm here, I'm right here.
okay, his room might be his environment, like your room is your environment. If you can create a room in the house that is a communicative environment where it's neither super ally or super, it's shared space, it's neutral space, even if it's just a sitting room at the end of the day and you have like a 5-minute chat, and it's not going to happen at once. It's not going to, the floodgates will not open and everything will come out. It'll be a little bit of a drizzle at a time until you kind of build up that rapport and that confidence for him to be able to, kind of go, okay, this is kind of what I need to talk about. And I also think if you make it the cone of silence kind of thing, anything that is said at home, free speech, we might not agree with it, but have that confidence to be able to say, you know what, I disagree with this, or I'm feeling this. I don't need you to say anything. I just need you to listen. I think that always helps.
Absolutely. And also one of the tricks, just a very last tip that I learned, was for you having the opportunity where I wasn't looking at you. So I would often pick you up from school where you could just vent, but because I was having to concentrate on driving, you didn't feel as if I was looking at you. You could just download. And I think that's quite a powerful stance. So again, it could be, talking in the kitchen whilst you're cooking, but that young person is able to download, or you might be marking some books, but you're slightly distracted where you don't feel the young person, or the young person doesn't feel they're being watched, give me your answers.
The under the microscope feeling can be quite uncomfortable, and then you kind of feel like, oh, I can't say anything because whatever I'm going to say is wrong. And it's not wrong. It's like the saying, there are no stupid questions. It's not stupid. It might not be, somebody might not 100% understand or not resonate with it, but just getting it out there so it's not just stuck up here the entire time helps. It really does help.
Yeah. We've reached the end of our time. Thank you so much for watching. Yasmin and I are going to be back next week, on Wednesday, 12:15, to talk about teenage awareness. That's right, isn't it? Teenage awareness, sorry. And if you look at our Facebook community group, there'll be more information leading up to that day. Yasmin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really helpful, and we hope you've enjoyed the program, and we will see you next week. Take care. Goodbye for now.